My father's will reading hit me like a punch to the gut. Everything, and I mean everything, went to Carol, my stepmother of barely 5 years. Then, with a saccharine smile, she looked at me and said, "You don't mind helping out with the estate? Just a little, do you, dear?" Little did she know, that little favor would ignite a firestorm. My name is Eleanor, but most people call me Ellie. I'm in my late 40s, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a pretty good handle on life. I had a comfortable home, a job I mostly enjoyed as a librarian, and a loving husband, Mark. My relationship with my father, Robert, had always been complicated, but it was ours. He remarried Carol about 5 years after my mother passed away. Carol was a piece of work. Younger, blonde, and with a smile that never quite reached her eyes, she always felt more like a gold digger in a Lifetime movie than a loving partner for my dad. I tried to be civil for his sake, but we never really clicked. Dad had been unwell for a while, his health slowly declining. We all knew it was coming, but that didn't make it any easier when the call finally came. Mark held me as I sobbed, the grief a heavy weight in my chest. We arranged the funeral, a somber affair attended by friends, family, and a surprising number of Carol's perfectly coiffed acquaintances. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following week. I wasn't expecting much. Dad had always been a bit tight with money, and I figured whatever he had would be split between Carol and me. Maybe a few sentimental items would come my way. I certainly wasn't expecting to be completely cut out. The lawyer, a stuffy man named Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Carol sat beside me, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, looking every bit the grieving widow. I felt a pang of something. Pity, maybe? Until I remembered the way she'd subtly steered Dad away from talking about old family memories, the way she'd encouraged him to spend lavishly on things they both knew he couldn't really afford. Mr. Henderson began to read the will, his voice monotonous. He listed Dad's assets, the house, the investments, the antique furniture, even his beloved collection of vintage records. My ears perked up, waiting for my name. And then it came. The clause stating that all of Robert's estate was to be left to his loving wife, Carol Ann Miller. I blinked. Then I blinked again. Surely I'd misheard. I looked at Carol, who was now openly weeping, her face buried in her hands. I turned back to Mr. Henderson, a knot forming in my stomach. "Excuse me," I said, my voice a little shaky. "Did you say all of it?" Mr. Henderson looked down at the document. "Yes, Ms. Eleanor Davies. The entirety of your father's estate is bequeathed to Mrs. Carol Ann Miller." The room seemed to tilt. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Had Dad and I had some falling out I'd forgotten about? Had Carol somehow manipulated him? It felt surreal, like a scene from a bad soap opera. After the reading, Carol approached me, her eyes red-rimmed but with a strange sort of triumph lurking beneath the surface. She put a hand on my arm, her touch surprisingly firm. "Oh, Ellie, darling," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "This must be so difficult for you." I just stared at her, unable to form a coherent sentence. "But," she continued, her grip tightening slightly, "I know your father would have wanted us to support each other. After all, we're family now." I finally found my voice, though it sounded distant, even to my own ears. "Family? Carol, you've been in his life for 5 years. I've been his daughter for 48. She sighed dramatically. "Well, yes, of course, but Robert loved us both in his own way. And now that I'm, in charge of everything, I was hoping you wouldn't mind helping out a little. With the estate, I mean. There's so much to sort through, and you know your father's things so much better than I do." My jaw dropped. She had just inherited everything, leaving me with absolutely nothing, and now she was asking me to help her manage it? The audacity was astounding. "Helping out?" I repeated incredulously. "Carol, I don't understand. You just inherited everything. Why would I help you?" She gave me that fake, sugary smile again. "Oh, just the little things. Going through his paperwork, maybe helping to organize the house before I decide what to do with it. It would mean so much to me, and I know your father would appreciate it." I stared at her for a long moment, trying to decipher her angle. Was she genuinely clueless? Or was this some kind of power play? Either way, the nerve of this woman was truly something else. "I'll think about it, Carol," I said, my voice flat. I needed to get out of there, to process what had just happened. Mark was waiting for me outside. He took one look at my face and wrapped me in a hug. "Rough?" he asked gently. I nodded, tears welling up again. "You won't believe it, Mark. She got everything. Everything." He pulled back, his brow furrowed. "Everything? What about you?" "Nothing," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Not a single thing." Mark's face hardened. That's not right, Ellie. Are you sure there wasn't some mistake?" "No mistake," I said. "Mr. Henderson was very clear. It all goes to Carol." We drove home in silence, the weight of the news hanging heavy in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, not just by Carol, but by my own father. Had I really meant so little to him that he would leave me nothing after all these years? The next few days were a blur of grief and confusion. Friends and family called, offering their condolences. Everyone was shocked by the terms of the will. My Aunt Susan, Dad's sister, was particularly incensed. "That woman!" she exclaimed over the phone. "I never trusted her, Ellie. Your father was always a bit naive when it came to women. She probably sweet-talked him into this." "Maybe," I said, but honestly I didn't know what to think. Dad wasn't a fool. He was a shrewd businessman, usually very careful with his finances. It just didn't make sense. Then Carol called again. Her tone was different this time, less saccharine, more demanding. "Ellie," she said, her voice sharp, "I really need you to come over and help me with your father's things. I can't do this all by myself, and frankly, I don't even know where to start." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tell her to figure it out herself. She was the one who inherited everything after all. But another part of me felt a strange sense of obligation. These were still my father's belongings, my family's history. "All right, Carol," I said, sighing. "I'll come over tomorrow morning." When I arrived at Dad's house, Carol was already there, looking flustered. The living room was a mess with boxes scattered everywhere and papers piled high on the coffee table. "Oh, thank goodness you're here," she said, her relief palpable. "I've been trying to sort through things, but it's just overwhelming." I surveyed the chaos. It looked like she'd just started throwing things into boxes without any real plan. "Okay," I said, trying to sound calm and organized. "Why don't we start with the paperwork? Do you know where Dad kept his important documents?" Carol shrugged. "Somewhere in his office, I think." We spent the next few hours going through Dad's office. It was a small room, filled with his old books, his worn leather armchair, and the heavy oak desk he'd had for years. Sorting through his things was bittersweet. Every object held a memory, a piece of our shared past. I found old photographs of Mom and me, report cards from my school days, even a faded drawing I'd made for him when I was a little girl. Carol mostly just pointed at things and asked if they were valuable. Around lunchtime, Carol suggested we take a break. She'd ordered takeout from some fancy Italian place. As we ate, she brought up the will again. "You know, Ellie," she said, twirling pasta around her fork, "I've been thinking, this house is really too big for just one person, and the upkeep is going to be enormous." I waited, sensing where this was going. "So," she continued, "I was wondering if you'd be interested in buying it from me? At a reasonable price, of course." I nearly choked on my lasagna. "Are you serious, Carol? You just inherited this house for free and now you want me to buy it from you?" She looked genuinely surprised. "Well, yes. I mean, where else would I live? And you have so many memories here. It just makes sense, doesn't it?" I couldn't believe the gall of this woman. She was trying to profit off my father's death, off my family's history. "No, Carol," I said, my voice firm. "It doesn't make sense. You inherited this house. You can live in it, or you can sell it to someone else, but I'm not buying it from you." Her smile faltered. "Oh, well, I just thought I'd offer." The rest of the day was tense. Carol continued to ask for my help, directing me to pack up various items, all while making comments about how much work it all was. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was deliberately trying to make me feel like I owed her something. As I was leaving, Carol stopped me at the door. "Ellie," she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "There's one more thing I need your help with." I braced myself. What now? "Your father had this storage unit," she said, pulling out a key from her purse. "He's been paying for it for years, but I have no idea what's inside. Would you mind going down there and taking a look? Maybe there's something valuable we can sell." I hesitated. The thought of going through more of Dad's belongings, especially in some dusty old storage unit, was exhausting. But I also felt a flicker of curiosity. What had Dad been keeping hidden away all these years? "All right, Carol," I said, taking the key. "I'll go check it out." Little did I know, that storage unit held a secret that would change everything. The storage unit was in a less than glamorous part of town, a dimly lit warehouse filled with rows of identical metal doors. I found the unit number Carol had scribbled on a piece of paper and unlocked the padlock. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dusty space crammed with boxes. The air inside was stale and musty, carrying the faint scent of old paper and forgotten things. I flipped on the single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. It cast a harsh light on the contents of the unit. There were stacks of cardboard boxes, a couple of old suitcases, and a tarp-covered piece of furniture in the corner. I started opening the boxes, one by one. Most contained old household items, Christmas decorations, out-of-season clothes, a box of Dad's old trophies. Nothing particularly surprising or valuable. I was starting to think Carol had sent me on a wild goose chase. Then I opened a box labeled Personal. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed letters and faded photographs, was a thick, bound journal. My heart skipped a beat. It looked like Dad's handwriting on the cover. I sat down on an overturned bucket and carefully opened the journal. The first few pages were filled with mundane entries about his day-to-day life, his work, the weather. But as I flipped through the pages, the tone shifted. The entries became more personal, more introspective. He wrote about his feelings after Mom passed away, his loneliness, and then he wrote about Carol. But it wasn't the loving, devoted account I might have expected. Instead, his entries painted a picture of a manipulative and controlling woman. He wrote about how she'd isolated him from his friends, how she'd constantly pressured him for money, and how he'd started to feel trapped in their marriage. My blood ran cold. Was this the truth? Had Dad been unhappy all this time? I kept reading, my hands trembling. Then, I found an entry from about 6 months before he died. He wrote about a conversation he'd had with Carol, a heated argument about his will. He mentioned wanting to leave something for me, but Carol had apparently been furious, insisting that she deserved everything after all the sacrifices she'd made for him. And then, the bombshell. In a shaky, almost frantic handwriting, he wrote about a secret bank account, one that Carol knew nothing about. He'd been slowly putting money into it over the past few years, intending to leave it to me as a safety net, a way to make up for whatever Carol might try to do. He even included the account number and the name of the bank. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. A secret bank account? Money that Carol didn't know about? This changed everything. I frantically searched through the rest of the box, and sure enough, I found a bank statement tucked away in an envelope. The balance was significant, more than I could have imagined. I sat there for a long time, the journal open in my lap, my mind reeling. My father hadn't forgotten about me. He'd tried to protect me, to provide for me in secret. And Carol had clearly manipulated him into leaving her everything in the official will. A wave of anger washed over me, hot and fierce. How could she have done this? How could she have pretended to be so caring and grief-stricken when she'd essentially stolen my inheritance? I knew what I had to do. I carefully put the journal and the bank statement back in the box, locked up the storage unit, and drove straight to Mr. Henderson's office. I laid out everything for him: the will, the journal entries, the bank statement. Mr. Henderson listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. "This is quite a development, Ms. Davies," he said finally, adjusting his glasses. "The journal entries, while not legally binding, certainly cast doubt on your father's true intentions. And the existence of this previously undisclosed bank account, this could potentially lead to a challenge of the will." Hope flickered in my chest. "So what can we do, Mr.?" Henderson explained the legal process, the possibility of contesting the will based on undue influence and the newly discovered assets. It wouldn't be easy, and it could be costly, but it was definitely an option. I didn't hesitate. "I want to do it," I said firmly. "I want to fight this." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal consultations and paperwork. Mr. Henderson was confident that we had a strong case, especially with the journal entries detailing Carol's manipulative behavior and Dad's intention to provide for me through the secret account. Meanwhile, I continued to help Carol with the estate, playing along as if nothing had changed. She seemed oblivious, still making demands and treating me like her personal assistant. It was infuriating, but I knew I had to keep my cool until our legal strategy was in place. Then came the day when Mr. Henderson served Carol with the legal documents challenging the will. I wasn't there to see her reaction, but I imagined it wasn't pretty. The phone call came later that day. Carol's voice was shrill with rage. "How dare you, Ellie? How dare you try to take what's rightfully mine?" "Rightfully yours, Carol?" I said, my voice calm despite the turmoil inside me. "You manipulated my father. You isolated him from his family. You made him believe that you deserved everything." "That's not true," she shrieked. "Robert loved me. He wanted me to have everything." "Did he?" I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Did he also want me to have nothing? Because that's what happened, Carol. You got everything and I got nothing, except for a secret bank account my father hid from you because he knew what you were really like." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Carol's voice dropped, becoming cold and calculating. "So, you found the journal. That old thing." "Robert was just being sentimental. He didn't mean any of it." "Oh, I think he did," I said. "And the bank account? Was that just sentimentality too?" She hung up on me. The legal battle dragged on for months. Carol fought tooth and nail, hiring an expensive lawyer and vehemently denying all allegations of manipulation. But the journal entries, combined with the evidence of the secret bank account, proved to be a powerful combination. The pressure started to get to Carol. She became increasingly erratic, calling me at all hours, leaving angry voicemails, even showing up unannounced at my house, demanding that I drop the lawsuit. One evening, she cornered me in my driveway, her face contorted with fury. "You're doing this out of spite, Ellie. You're just jealous because your father loved me more." "Loved you more?" I scoffed. "Carol, he felt trapped by you. He was hiding money from you because he didn't trust you. That doesn't sound like love to me." She lunged at me, her nails outstretched. I recoiled, shocked by her sudden aggression. Luckily, Mark came outside just then, and his presence seemed to deter her. She glared at me one last time before storming back to her car. The incident shook me. It was clear that Carol was becoming desperate. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the case went to mediation. The lawyers hammered out a settlement. Carol would keep the house, as it was in her name in the official will. But I would receive the funds from the secret bank account, along with a significant portion of the other assets. It wasn't everything I felt I deserved, but it was a victory. The day the settlement was finalized, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the validation. My father hadn't forgotten me. He had tried to provide for me in his own way. I never spoke to Carol again. After the settlement, she disappeared, presumably to enjoy her ill-gotten gains. Part of me felt a pang of bitterness, but mostly, I felt relief. I was finally free from her toxic presence. The money from the secret account allowed Mark and me to pay off our mortgage and make some long overdue renovations to our home. It wasn't life-changing wealth, but it provided a sense of security and allowed us to breathe a little easier. More importantly, going through my father's journal helped me understand him in a way I never had before. I realized that our complicated relationship was partly due to his own unhappiness in his second marriage. He'd been a good man, trapped in a difficult situation. His secret act of defiance, the hidden bank account, was his way of showing me he cared, even when he couldn't do it openly. Years have passed since then. Mark and I are doing well. We've traveled, spent time with friends, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of life. I often think about my father, not with bitterness anymore, but with a sense of understanding, and even a touch of sadness for the difficult last years of his life. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if Carol had simply been honest, if she hadn't been so greedy. Maybe we could have found some common ground, some way to navigate the aftermath of Dad's death without all the animosity and legal battles. But then I remember her cold eyes and her manipulative ways, and I know that was never a possibility. The experience taught me a valuable lesson about the complexities of family, the destructive power of greed, and the importance of knowing your own worth. I learned that sometimes the people who seem the most entitled are the ones who deserve the least. And I learned that even in the face of betrayal, there can be unexpected discoveries and a path towards healing and a new beginning.